Welcome back into the Dead Arm Sports Podcast, coming at you on Wednesday. We're recording on Tuesday.
Taco Tuesday,
and it is May. So we are
May Day day.
Yes, inching closer to the NFL season. Still quite a ways out, but hey, we're getting there.
Is there any significance to May Day? Is it just they just call it like just May 1st just because? Like April Fool's Day, at least there's a theme. It's like fool your friends and coworkers and family members and pets. What is May Day? Just May 1st? Like what? There's no significance?
No.
Maybe I don't know.
I feel like it's turned into just like the Justin Timberlake meme popping up everywhere if it's going to be May, but that's pretty much all
that's
I see
about
nowadays.
Right. Social media undefeated, never lost.
Yes. I have a fun episode for you today.
Great
going to recap
Great
the
reference.
AFC side of the draft. I'm going to touch a little MLB since we didn't get a chance to do that last week with our mock draft. And then recap the Mexico Open where yours truly, Tony Baloney, finally puts us in the win column. So I will brag about that in that segment. But I'm going to open up with a question of the day, Gel.
Mexico open up?
No. Question of
on
the
a Taco
day.
Tuesday?
We had college football playoff news come out today. So just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. So in 2024 and 2025, they are going to do first round on campus, second round at bowl sites. So like Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, blah, 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 blah. That'll kind of rotate around. Third round semifinals are going to be at two of those bowl sites. And then the national championship will kind of rotate around those sites. How awesome is it going to be that first round is going to be on college campuses in a playoff atmosphere? Winner moves on, loser goes home.
I didn't know if maybe we can do a deeper dive on this at a later date, because this is the greatest thing ever. I was against I was against the expansion of playoffs in the beginning. I was like, okay, we can go to 6. You are solely responsible for me changing my mind in expanding this playoff to 12 with all the matchups that you read off. I hated the idea of 16 because we don't need to see the 16th best team versus 1. 12, and also I don't even want to see 8 teams and see 8 against 1. Like we're just looking at bloodbaths. 12 is perfect. You give those teams the top 4 teams a first round. Is it top 4, right? Yeah. Top 4 teams a first round bye. Yep. And then you've got 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, et cetera, et cetera. Just like how the NFL playoffs used to be. And so I completely flipped on my mindset of that. That's the best thing ever. And when they announced the schedule it starts in 2025, correct?
2024. This is the last season of it. The 2024 season. So technically this will
2025, January 2025.
This is the last year of the 14 playoff.
2024, 2025 college football playoffs. Your NFL wildcard weekend technically gets kicked off Thursday with the college football semifinals. Thursday and Friday, you've got college football semifinals. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, NFL wildcard weekend. Sorry, honey. If you want to go on a girls' trip, adios, because the TV is mine for the next 5 days. Like this is a totally epic weekend now, and I'm really happy about how pessimistic I was and now how incredibly optimistic I am about the 12-team playoff. They nailed the scheduling by not putting the semifinals on a Saturday or a Sunday. They nailed it with the Thursday, Friday games. I'd assume that the weekend before would be like, or they'd probably have to give them 10 days or so for round for the first round, right? Or the second round, however that works out.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I believe
because you'd have to give those. You
first-
can't give those guys 4 days of rest or 5 days of rest from Saturday to Thursday. So you'd have to almost turn that into like a 10-day deal.
The first round games played at campus sites would take place on Friday, December 20th, and 3 more games on Saturday, December 21st. Quarterfinals are scheduled to be at bowl sites on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And then the semifinals are Thursday, January 9th, and then January 10th on the Friday.
Okay, so that checks out.
So the championship is January 20th. So we're getting that pushed out almost a week, 2 weeks.
So we got another month, we got a month of meaningful football here in college. Obviously, we all know the bowl games are less relevant every single year. They're outside of the college football playoff. Those bowl games are now going to be even less relevant given that they've expanded it out so much. But no, I'm all in favor of all this. This is great for myself. It's obviously going to be great for TV. What's going to even make it even better for TV is that they eliminated the stoppage of the clock after a first down. So you no longer are going to have any more 4-hour and 30-minute Fresno State versus Clemson games. Thank God. But no, a lot of what college football is doing right now, I am massively in favor of.
Yeah.
Sorry for just going off for 6 minutes
it's
there, but
topic,
I'm pumped.
That is very, very awesome. And yeah, I'm just so thankful that they're having those first round games not at neutral sites. And you're going to get to see a rowdy crowd in playoff action. I mean, we've never really had that before unless a season has come down to that final game where the winner, like for example, the Big Ten, the winner goes to Indy to go play in the college football or the Big Ten championship game. So we haven't really had that environment at all. So it's going to be awesome to have national championships on the line, 4 teams getting to host, just rowdy crowds. I mean, I'm just imagining the atmosphere is going to be just absolutely electric. So curious to see what's going to happen and the teams that are going to start bitching when they have to come up to Michigan or Ohio State or maybe a Wisconsin at the end of December playing in 10-degree weather, an SEC team coming up and just complaining, but it's going to be so much fun.
And instead of bitching about who's ranked 5th or 6th and not making the top 4, it's going to be teams that were ranked 13, 14, 15, 16. Like, how did you even come up with these rankings? There is still no set system for that.
Yeah.
I hope they do like a March Madness style selection Sunday. I know they kind of do that already, but it's like, it feels less awesome.
They'll get it hyped up, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because a lot of times, who the top 4 teams are going to be. It's pretty much every year. It's like 3 of them are going to be Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia as of late.
Yeah.
And so now there's just so much more excitement going back. If they go do a top 25 or whatever, and your top 12 get in.
Yeah.
I'm pumped. I'm stoked. They killed it.
Yes. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Go to YouTube, subscribe, click the bell there. That way you know when our live episodes drop. We monitor that chat. You can ask us any questions there. Otherwise, if you do miss out asking us questions there, you can always hit us up on our socials at Dead Arm Sports. Gel can be found at DasJel. That's at DASJEL. I can be found at DasJPEC. That's at DASJPEC. Give us a follow on all of those. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening platform. If you write us a review, screenshot that bad boy, send it to us, and we will swag you up with some Dead Arm Sports goodies. AFC is on the slate today. We are going to recap and just kind of go over some of our biggest takeaways for the AFC side of the draft that took place over the weekend. Going to start off, though, just prefacing Lamar Jackson. We did get news right before the draft. I was out on the golf course and like, yep, here we go. Here's Lamar signing. So signs a very similar deal to Jalen Hurts. Gets a little bit more of a pay bump because, hey, it's the NFL and that's what happens. One guy signs a contract, the next guy has to make just a touch more. So, but Lamar gets locked into Baltimore, kind of foresaw that coming. There wasn't really a ton of talk of him ending up anywhere else. Nothing really came to fruition there, and Baltimore's got their guy.
Yeah, Lamar gets 5 years, 260 with 185 guaranteed. Jalen signed for 5 years, 254. I don't have his in front of me, but I believe it was an AAV of 51 million. So I'm just going to say 254, 1 million less per season than Lamar. And Jackson got the 185 million guaranteed. Jalen was 181 or 170. I think 179.
This sounds right.
So 179.1 or something. So pretty much the same deal. I mean, Lamar got his extra million per year in both overall number on that contract and the guaranteed money, but basically the same thing. This is what I said in the last time that we talked the Lamar contract right after Jalen signed was, if you're Lamar, just sign the exact same deal Jalen Hurts signed. You're not going to get a fully guaranteed contract. Deshaun Watson is a complete outlier. The example before Deshaun Watson was Kirk Cousins, and that with the Vikings, and that was a long time ago when he signed a 3-year. Feels like it. I mean, that was probably 2016-ish, something like that. Yeah. It feels like Kirk's been there for a long time. He signed 2 extensions since he originally signed with Minnesota, and they've all been fully guaranteed, but they've all also been short term, where I think Kirk's original deal was 3 years, 99 million or something like that. What a dick for them not to give him the extra million and make it $100 million contract. But no, I said, I was thinking, hey, Lamar, sign the exact same thing that Jalen did. You've got pretty similar, career bona fides in terms of, hey, you won an MVP, Jalen. Hey, you made a Super Bowl. You're pretty, both run heavy, not the prettiest passers, although Jalen's soared in terms of, passer prettiness, I guess. His deep ball is awesome. Where Lamar's, again, his biggest weapon is are his legs. But they both been making the playoffs when healthy for most of their career. I mean, obviously Jalen has a couple less years on Lamar, but I believe they're also about the same age because Lamar came out when he was 21 and Jalen came out after three years at Alabama and a season at Oklahoma. So they're probably pretty similar in terms of age. I think it's a good deal for both sides. I'm glad that we don't have to talk about Lamar until we talk about our predictions for the Ravens going forward. I was so done with that contract talk.
Right? It's nice to have Lamar and A-Rod all wrapped up and not having to talk about them weekly. But no, let's get into this draft here. I mean, it was an epic first round, saw numerous trades that I'm sure we'll get into. One of my big takeaways is I love what the Pittsburgh Badgers did in this draft. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I thought they had just a classic Pittsburgh draft, reloading on that defense, got some solid guys in there. Started off Broderick Jones, tackle out of Georgia, which I think is a solid pick there. Get some protection for Kenny Pickett. Get Joey Porter Jr. essentially for Chase Claypool. So he got him right at the start of that second round cornerback. Keanu Benton was sitting there for them. Get that D tackle position. Darnell Washington, huge tight end body that'll give Kenny Pickett a nice target, decent blocker. And then Nick Herbig just kept falling off the board to Saturday. And I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. Yes, we are both Badger fans, but I think the biggest thing with him was he's kind of that like hybrid position that he really doesn't fit into a D end, and he's kind of like an outside linebacker too. So I think that kind of threw some teams off. But if they can get him into the right situation, he's going to be phenomenal. And you can line him up opposite TJ Watt, and that's going to be a scary defense. And I really like what Pittsburgh did here.
Well, and going back to when TJ Watt was drafted, he was almost kind of looked in a not a similar way in terms of ability, but in terms of size and everything. I mean, TJ was kind of, hey, does he have the length to be a dominant edge rusher? Does he have the size to be a down offense or down defensive lineman to fight, out of the 3-point stance? And obviously he's shown that he can hang. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to go out here and say Nick Herbig's going to have that type of the type of career that TJ's had so far. But I think, getting him to be able to get him day 3 in the 4th round, that's a fucking boss of a steal. Darnell Washington, I know you and I were both pretty down on him. There were some mocks that had him as being the second, at least early on, had him being the second tight end off the board. I don't think either of us bought into that. I compared him to Mercedes Lewis, but to be able to get him into the 3rd round, you get a 6'7" tight end that can catch. And even if he only is a blocking tight end, you can pair him opposite of Freiermuth or line them both up side to side and let them just be a red zone duo there. Keanu Benton, I had him in the 1st round going to Philly. So for them, he's a great fit there. Fits a need for Pittsburgh there in the 2nd round. Joey Porter Jr., I think possibly the steal of the draft, to be able to get a guy that I thought was going to be going in the teens, for him to be going to the franchise where his dad played and was a legend. Like, I texted my friend Marissa, shout out, doesn't listen to the show. I'll get her on that shit. So she's a huge Steelers fan, and I said after the 1st round was over, fair, but I said after the 1st round was over, I was like, Joey Porter, I said the Steelers are killing it. Broderick Jones, absolutely love it. To be able to get him in the 1st round, they're finally going to try to do something about that porous offensive line. And then Joey Porter Jr. sitting there as just fell into your lap so perfectly. I completely am on the same page with you with the Steelers. I just wrote in my notes, Pittsburgh killing it. Like that was it, because they absolutely killed it. I 100% agree with what you said. And I love their draft as well.
Or you get into a team that you like, or another one, Gel. I don't think we're going to be bringing it up tomorrow on the NFC at all, but just kind of thought that this would fit in here too, with Joey Porter's father playing for the Steelers. How cool was it too that Deuce Vaughn's dad, scout for the Cowboys, got to call him and tell him that, hey, we're picking you. So
that's the best thing cool ever. Moment. That's the kind of stuff that just like gives you chills,
Oh yeah.
Like, and I don't know why they didn't pick another running back earlier. I mean, you've got 2 small backs. They don't have maybe they signed Zeke for $4 million or something.
Yeah, he's still
that's still out there as a possibility, but we can get into that later.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to Houston. I thought they had I liked their draft, but I thought it was kind of a curious one. So number 2 overall, they go CJ Stroud. Then they trade back up with Arizona, giving up the number 12 overall pick, their 2nd first rounder, the number 33 overall pick, their 2nd rounder, a 1st next year and a 3rd next year, to move up to number 3, or they end up taking Will Anderson. Do you have any initial thoughts on that? I know draft day, we were kind of thinking like that seems like, kind of thinking that seems like a lot, but I'm going to put another spin on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those that it's funny because the whole time the argument was, is Houston going to go quarterback? Is it Will Levis? Is it CJ Stroud? And then we got the rumors that no, they're not going to take a quarterback. They're looking at Tyree Wilson, Will Anderson, and Houston's like, hold my beer. Guess what? We're getting both. They end up taking CJ Stroud and then pulling off a blockbuster trade with Houston or Arizona to move back up to take Will Anderson. And yeah, I mean, that first and third could be kind of valuable for Houston. I don't see them having or being outside of that top 10. So that is kind of a steep pick to give up. But also, Will Anderson is one of these guys that we're talking about as a generational talent on defense. And if he pans out, teamed up with D'Amico Ryans as the head coach there, one of the solid guys on defense for Houston in their history. I mean, this could be an epic draft for them that just really reboots Houston's franchise after the whole Deshaun Watson debacle that was the last couple of years, bringing that franchise down. So I'm fine with it, actually. And you think about, too, how often first round picks sometimes are busts and just don't pan out. Why not take a chance here on a guy that has gone up against some of the best teams in the SEC and just kind of torched them and torn them apart over the last couple seasons? So, yes, down season this last year, but we can't forget. I mean, he was in the Heisman talks the season before. So this guy's unbelievable. You got CJ Stroud. We weren't sure what they were necessarily going to do with the quarterback position. I think that they went with the right guy here. Very, very happy that was not Will Levis at 2. Might be talking about him a little bit later, but no, I'm fine with what they gave up. Yeah, it was steep, but if you think that Will Anderson is going to be a generational talent, cornerstone of your defense, go for it.
It's amazing that a guy, we're saying he had a down season at Alabama against the SEC, had 10 sacks, 17 TFLs, and a pick 6. As like that tells you something about how good Will Anderson's previous season was, which was significantly better. I mean, you can almost double those numbers: 31 TFLs, 17 and a half sacks. But no, I guess I think we're kind of looking at this trade in a kind of a backwards way. If you look at this trade as, hey, no, we took Will Anderson at 2. We gave up the 12th, 33rd, a first and a third next year for CJ Stroud. If you look at it that way, it's like, that's about what you have to give up to get a high-end quarterback. Yeah. So I think that you just need to flip, like, I'm not saying you, but some of the listeners, some people, I mean, and I don't know why I take anything, that people on social media say, why would you give that up for an edge rusher? It's like, no, you gave it up for CJ Stroud. It's like, that makes that trade look a lot more reasonable to get what you hope is going to be your franchise quarterback going forward for the next decade plus. And we'll see how that pans out, given that Stroud has had, again, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr. over his career. And not to mention some of the running backs that he's had. But if you look at it, like, they traded up for Stroud, because if you imagine Will Anderson being, if they did this really smart, if they would have taken Will Anderson at 2 and left a QB open there at 3, if a team wanted to trade up for Arizona, then you're talking about a bidding war for that 3rd overall pick.
Big time.
And by taking Stroud there at 3, by taking Stroud at 2, you avoid that bidding war at 3. So I think I look at this as a trade up for Stroud, not necessarily for Will Anderson. And if you look at it that way, it seems like a really nice move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The only thing I didn't really care for with Houston's draft, which obviously they were limited, trading away that 3rd round pick, correct? The 105. Or no, they traded away the 33. They got the 105.
They traded away 33, which was their first, which was their early second round pick.
Yeah. Okay. Just wide receiver still going to be a struggle this year. They got
that's why I brought up the guys
Nathaniel
from
Dell
Ohio
staying
State
in Houston, so that's cool. But yeah, that's the only bad part. But hey, next year's wide receiver group should be pretty solid, and we'll see. But again, they're not going to have they'll have Cleveland's first round pick, so screw it.
Do they still have Cleveland's next year again?
I think so.
You're probably right.
But Yeah.
Because I think
I'll have to double check now.
I think Cleveland gave up like 3 firsts and like 2 2s and then like a late round swap or something. So yeah, I think you're probably right. And Cleveland, based on how Deshaun played in 2022, total garbage. So there's a chance that ends up being a high pick. I thought that however, I will add, I think Arizona
received 2022, 2023, 2024 first round pick.
That's fucking for a guy that wasn't ever going to play for that Texans franchise again. That's not a bad haul. I will add to this. I thought Arizona did still kill it with this 3rd overall pick, especially given that when you're talking about next year's, or I guess at this point, do we say upcoming season or do we talk about it like it's next year? I don't know. Semantics. But no, I think that Arizona still killed it, given that Houston could still have a very, very, very reasonably a top 7-8 pick in next year's draft, plus their own pick with Kyler still recovering from an ACL. Like they could, if even if they're not the number 1 overall pick, they could, and let's say they fall as the number 5 overall pick. You pair number 5, number 7, and a future first and a second or something, or a second and third or whatever. You're going to immediately have the most capital in this draft because of this, given that you're going to have the Texans first, your own first, the Texans second, the Texans third, your own third. I don't think a second round swap was there next year, but you're going to have all that additional capital for next year, and your own team is going to suck. So they might be the front runners for Caleb Williams. Plus, if they're able to offload Kyler then for a second,
tough with his contract, but we'll be talking about that all off season next year. One of the teams that I was kind of at the start, but then the more I thought about it and looked at it, where they got some of these guys, I was actually thought that they did a pretty good job. And that's the Tennessee Titans. Ended up punting the quarterback position in that first round. Will Levis was sitting there for them at pick 11. Ended up taking Peter Skronsky, which I was kind of surprised it didn't end up in Chicago, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. But got a solid tackle / guard that you can plug in to protect. And Peter. Then end up trading back up to get Will Levis in that second round. You're not having to pay him first round money. So you kind of don't have to worry about that down the road, and you can kind of just kick the tires with him and see what you have. And if he's not, then fine, we'll move on from him after a while. You don't have that first round capital that you're having to worry about, the money that you're going to have to be giving him. And then I like the Tajay Spears signing too, as a replacement potentially for Derrick Henry down the road. So I thought Titans low key made some nice moves that were kind of low risk for their future, which obviously has been bleak the last couple of years in the downward spiral that they're in.
Yeah, and they've taken a few risks over these past couple of years. The one being, and I can't remember his name because he's been pretty much irrelevant, was this corner out of Virginia Tech, where if it weren't for some back injuries, he probably would have been a top 10 pick. They ended up getting him at 21, and voila, the back injuries continue to show up. So he's been basically out. But they took another risk signing a defensive tackle out of Mississippi State. He's a total stud. I'm thinking Malik McDowell, but I know that's wrong.
No.
If you could take a look at that.
Yep.
But I thought this was a great draft. I think you're taking one of the safer prospects to be a stud in Peter Skronsky. They needed offensive line help. Again, one of those players, we mentioned this before, that can play anywhere on the offensive line. He could start at guard, move out to tackle. He could start at tackle if you think that he's ready to be a day one starter at tackle. Will Levis,
they did not take a D tackle at all.
No. I'm saying, or previous years.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's like, wait, what is going on?
Google up their roster. Okay. He's just signed a massive contract. Will Levis in the second. like we were talking about, hey, if Levis falls to 11, he could be a player for Tennessee at number 11 overall. For them to trade up
Jeffrey Simmons.
That's who I was thinking of. And he was a big risk. He was a huge red flag coming out. He's behaved himself since he
good boy.
Good. Since he came into Tennessee under that regime. So that risk paid off. But this draft got a real safe prospect in Skoronski. Little risky of a pick for Levis if you would have taken him at 11, but to take him at the top of the second round,
I'm fine
whatever.
That's
and maybe he ends up panning out, maybe not. I know both you and I aren't fans of him, but hey.
This might have put a chip on his shoulder, though. I mean, he was at draft night. The camera kept showing him every pick after the first 4 or 3 quarterbacks in front of him were off the board. And you could tell he was getting a little irritated, but trying to keep his composure, knowing he's on national TV, and then didn't get picked. And he's like, hey, you know what? I'm out of here. Was not in town.
And then to dip out, I don't know. That's kind of a red flag to me a little bit, but I'm going to touch on him a little bit later, actually. And I love the Tyjae Spears pick. I think that might be the win of the draft. They said after his pick, or maybe it was the following day, that his medicals came back and he is effectively Odell Beckham Jr., where he has no ACL in one of his knees. But they said that still could lead to a strong 4 to 5 years of, healthy football. And a third round pick, when you're trying to either offload Derrick Henry or loosen the load of Derrick Henry, or just if you want to move off of him, you can. If you've got a good back behind him, I mean, we saw a little bit of Hassan Haskins last year, but he was never anything really special at Michigan. No. I mean, I think Tyjae Spears has a little bit of a chance to be something truly special. So I love that pick in the third round. And then grabbed another offensive lineman in round 6. So I'm a fan. I like this draft. We'll see the Levis thing, how that plays out, but the Skoronski pick at 1, at 11 in the first, that's a money pick. He'll be a day 1 starter. Okay, the last, I guess the next team I want to touch on, the LV. I wrote down Oakland, but I've learned now it's the Las Vegas Raiders. Yeah. We were thinking this whole time, hey, they're going to go quarterback early. How much belief do they really have in Jimmy G to stay healthy? Hey, Will Levis is sitting there at 7. Why not grab him there? They end up going Tyree Wilson at 7. I thought that was a great pick. They need edge rush help. Tyree Wilson at that point was the best edge rusher available. And not shockingly, exactly what previously Al Davis, now Mark Davis, the creepy doll looking face and hair guy. Exactly what they love. Long, super athletic, pretty raw talent, but really productive, or still relatively productive, but 6'5" edge rusher. He's got that bend that you want in an edge rusher as well. Not extremely polished, but that's something that if you believe in your coaching staff, which you better at this point, you can turn him into a much more polished edge rusher. I loved that pick there at 7. And then to get what a lot of people said was the consensus number 1 tight end in Michael Mayer, to get him in the second round. It's a need. They obviously traded away Darren Waller this year, and Michael Mayer fell about 30, or maybe not 30, probably 20 to 25 picks further than a lot of these mocks had him. A lot of people had Michael Mayer going 13 to the Packers. I know you and I weren't on the same page with that. We thought Kincaid was the top tight end in this draft just because of the upside that Kincaid has that Mayer kind of lacks. But to be able to get somebody that was that highly thought of, I mean, he's going to come in as a day 1 starter again. And to be able to get a high-end edge rusher, a day 1 starter at tight end, we know Jimmy G he's had a ton of success with Kittle. even going back to the 4 games that he started in New England, him and Gronk had that rapport. So I think this was essential for them to get a fit with Jimmy G. They needed an edge, a high-end guy, taking a risk on with that first round pick a little bit, but it's the guys that the Raiders love. However, so I'm not just blowing my load on them completely. 4th round, Aiden O'Connell, Purdue. A lot of guys, going into this past season, we were looking at O'Connell as one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten, but he kind of had a clunker of a year. I know that it's the 4th round. He's probably a guy that Josh McDaniels likes. He kind of has a similar playing style to Jimmy G, where, if you look at the guys after McConnell, it's guys like DTR, et cetera. But I think they screwed up waiting till, I think O'Connell was like the 6th quarterback off the board, probably like the 8th quarterback off the board after Jake Haener and after Stetson Bennett. Not saying I would pick Bennett over anybody. We'll get into that as well. But you think the Raiders waited too long to grab a quarterback? I don't like that it's Aiden O'Donnell as what's going to be the backup to Jimmy G. I mean, Jimmy G, historically, he's going to go down within the first 10 games. You're sitting there with Aiden O'Connell and Brian Hoyer as your plan for recovery. So any thoughts on that? Do you think they should have gone with a quarterback somewhere in the 3rd or top of the 4th?
I think that they probably did their research on it and were like, if we're not going to go for Levis at 7, assuming he was the only one that was there, that let's just kind of punt the position, hope Jimmy G stays healthy, and go from there with it. So I'm fine with it. I don't really see the upside with it. I would have rather seen them go after like Jalen Hall or something. That we'll talk about him tomorrow with Minnesota, but just someone with a little bit more upside, even a DTR. I mean, that I would have been fine with that. But I think they're just rolling the dice with Jimmy G, hoping he stays healthy. And if not, hey, we're going to have one of the top picks in the NFL draft next year. And there's a lot of solid quarterbacks. We'll have Jimmy G's 1 year removed from, or 1 year closer to being able to cut him. So I'm fine with it. They had a plan going into it and they executed it. So I'm totally good with that. So no issues for me at all. One of the other teams that kind of low key, I liked what they did in the draft, which not normally is a team that I'm usually fond of what they do, but I really liked kind of how things fell for New England. I thought that they ended up having a fairly decent draft. Christian Gonzalez ends up falling to them at 17, one of the top corners in the draft out of Oregon. End up getting a nice D end in Keon White there in the 2nd round, and then just kind of got a bunch of other guys that in there. Marty Mapu, Sacramento State was their 3rd round pick, but I thought that low key, those are pretty solid picks to start off. Cornerback was a huge need. Bill Belichick's done a great job with developing the cornerback position. So Christian Gonzalez, is going to end up being a stud here in a couple of years. And I kind of like the Kayshon Boutte pick too in the 6th round. Somebody that he would have come out last year and would have been a 1st or 2nd rounder. For whatever reason, decided to come back to school. Well, he was kind of injury plagued too. He was coming off of an injury similar to how George Pickens was as well. So his stock wasn't super high, but a lot higher than the 6th round, that's for sure. But maybe give a little chip on his shoulder. Obviously, he's got some off the field issues we don't need to dive into on the podcast that rumored to be during
rumors.
Yes. Championship.
Let's not.
Yes. But no, so somebody that you can potentially put on the outside. Granted, it is Mac Jones there, but I thought New England did an okay job.
Yeah. I mean, the Christian Gonzalez pick that's the money pick right there, especially given that they were originally sitting there at 14 and easily could have taken him there at 14, traded back to 17, got additional capital, and Christian Gonzalez still fell in their lap at 17. I had Gonzalez going, I believe, to Detroit, possibly at 6, or maybe it was the Raiders at 7. So for them to grab Christian Gonzalez there, I absolutely love that. Their second round pick, Keon White, another guy that fell a little bit. He's a stud. I question a little bit on them taking both a kicker and a punter.
Yeah, that was a little...
That's the only question mark. And they only took one offensive skill position player, which was Kayshon Boutte. The rest of, or no, they did take another wideout in round 6, Demario Douglas. But you mentioned Belichick's ability to develop corners and develop secondary players. They got 3 DBs. They got themselves a center, which I feel like is still an underrated position. I mean, every good offensive line is led by, yes, you need to have a stud left tackle, but beyond that, you need to have a stud center. We're seeing the difference that Jason Kelce made in Philadelphia. I think a lot with what Jalen Hurts is looking at. That's what's most impressive. Or that's what gives so much value to the center position is the center can basically tell the quarterback, like, this is your Mike linebacker. This is your wedge. Your safety is, or you've got 2 safeties back there, but one of them is like hedging towards one side of the field. The center's out there making audibles on the offensive line, telling, hey, guard, you go attack this other edge rusher. I'm going to fade towards your side. Hey, right tackle, push yourself out. We're going to have help going towards your side so you can fight this blitz that I'm seeing. That's the underrated part about the center position that I think gets overlooked all the time. So Patriots have always had strong offensive lines, at least for the most part. And I think a lot of that is due to coaching. So I'm great with taking a center right there in round 4. They just didn't address offensive weapons. That's my only beef here with the Patriots. And yeah, Kayshon Boutte in the 6th. Okay, Mac Jones still has nobody to throw the ball to. Like Juju Smith-Schuster overpaying for a possession receiver there. That's not going to cut it. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's my only beef is they went no skill position player until Kayshon Boutte in the 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else you got for the AFC? I kind of hit on most of my guys.
Yeah, I say let's go into, we're going to give you 3 of our favorite picks and 3 of our least favorite picks. So why don't you kick it off, Joe?
All right, I'm going to start off with my top 3, and this is in no specific order outside of my honorable mention, which that is in order, I suppose. Honorable mention from my top 3 is I like the Darius Thompson-Robinson pick to Cleveland, backing up Deshaun Watson. I think that, they don't play similar games necessarily. I mean, DTR is a lot more of a running quarterback than Deshaun is at this point, but DTR's got a high upside. We saw him be extremely prolific with UCLA this past season. And I think, and again, he was in that UCLA system for 5 years. So he's an older dude. He's mature. You're not taking a chance on character. And if we know anything about Cleveland, they need as much help in that department as they can get. So I love that DTR pick to Cleveland. Honorable mention, not making my top 3, but let's get into the top 3. Dalton Kincaid to Buffalo at 25. I had Kincaid, or we were thinking Kincaid could be the first tight end off the board. He was, but the first tight end off the board falls all the way to 25. He was the best skill position player available. Grab another weapon for Josh Allen. I think that was essential, especially when Gabe Davis, we mentioned this before, hasn't turned into that truly reliable number 2 wide receiver that we've been waiting on. And we don't really know the status on Stephon Diggs long term. So Dalton Kincaid can be a great complement to what Dawson Knox does. That's going to be confusing all season. Dawson and Dalton, good God. DK's also at the tight end position. Number 2 in my top 3, previously mentioned, Joey Porter to the Steelers at 32. They had reportedly a lot of teams calling up and trying to move up to that number 32 overall pick. I think they made the absolute right decision to not move off that pick. It's not like you're going to get a haul that, Arizona did for the Texans to move back up to 3. Probably would have been, hey, we'll swap seconds and we'll give you another 4th or something. That's not worth giving up on Joey Porter Jr. Thought that was an absolute money pick. Well done, Steelers. Again, absolutely love their draft. And I got to give a shout out to my boy, Chase Brown, running back out of Illinois, going to Cincinnati in the 5th. I think that they're going to see a ton out of Chase Brown. I don't know when it's going to happen that they move off of Mixon, but I think Chase Brown is going to be the reason that they do. Whether Brown shows them something this offseason and they move off of Mixon before training camp, whether they ride out one final season with Mixon on the franchise tag or something, or on a discounted deal, and Chase Brown is the number 2 back and proves that he can be a number 1. I just think getting him in the 5th that's an absolutely money deal. It fits a need for Cincinnati. That was maybe my favorite pick in the entire draft, was getting Chase Brown, who I think is extremely dynamic, that late.
Yeah, no, I love that pick. I had Cincinnati written down up above, but ultimately just put those other teams in front of them. But that Chase Brown pick was awesome. I echo your Dalton Kincaid to Buffalo. That was one of my 3 favorite picks. I really like the Will Anderson to Houston. I think that was awesome that they moved back up, and I think he's going to be just an absolute monster in that division for the next few years, which, by the way, that division now has Will Levis, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that division is insane. You had 3 quarterbacks in this draft class, so it'll be fun to watch these guys battle it out over the years.
So we'll see we know one team is set for a decade in Trevor Lawrence. We'll see about all 3 of these other guys, if they're even going to be 5th or actually Levis doesn't even have the 5th year option, but it's going to be really interesting because we know only one of those teams has a quarterback for the decade.
Yep. My last pick that I liked is Miami. You have Raheem Mostert, injury prone. Jeff Wilson Jr., injury prone. You go out and you get Devin Achane, and I think that was an awesome pick.
Love that.
And I really think he's going to be an absolute monster in that offense. So I really like that pick. Getting into my 3 least favorite, I didn't really see a ton that I just was like, what the heck are you doing? Like I did with the NFC. The NFC I'll be a little bit more passionate about, but my 3 here just were picks that I just didn't really get at the time when you could have gotten somebody else later to fill in. Tank Bigsby to Jacksonville is one of them. I know we were going back and forth via text about the running back position there with ETN, and it's not a 3-down back that you need someone else in there, but I thought you could have gotten somebody else a little bit later on.
Chase Brown.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of other guys that were going that could do what Tank Bigsby is going to do for you. Marvin Mims to Denver was another one that I just didn't really understand. I don't really think he's any better than any of their 3 current wide receivers. Yes, you're going to get him for under a new contract and you can maybe trade away one of those other guys, but I didn't really understand that one a whole lot. Obviously, Sean Payton's coming in, so he sees something in him that he likes for his offense.
Mims was a third?
I think he's last of the second.
Really? Wow. Yeah, that's a little high for me too.
I'll have to double check here while you're going through yours. And then my last one, they needed to do a wide receiver, but Jordan Addison was still on the board. Quentin Johnston to the Chargers. He's had drops. I don't know. I think Jordan Addison would have been a way better fit in their offense, in their system with Justin Herbert, but at least they got a wide receiver, which they needed, but I wasn't crazy about that pick either.
Yeah, my number 1 of my bottom 3, I'm seconding everything you're just saying here about the Chargers. Quentin Johnson, I mean, you've already got Mike Williams on one side. Keenan Allen is the one that you need to replace. He's the one that's getting old. And Addison would be an immediate impact, like at least, immediately playing that slot. And then if Keenan goes down, or if Mike Williams goes down again, which both of them tend to do every year, Addison is ready to jump in right away and be a contributor. You've got Justin Herbert still on this rookie deal. Like, you need to win now. Quentin Johnson, if he's got to take a couple years or a year and a half to work on his hands, that doesn't help the Chargers right now. He's not a super quick guy. He's more of just a downfield threat that's great against Big 12 defenses. I'm not saying Quentin Johnson is undraftable, obviously not, but that's a guy that I think deserved to be a second rounder. If you're the Chargers, just grab Addison, the most sure thing that's left on the board. I don't know. I mean, maybe they were thinking Jackson Smith and Jigba once he fell to 20, and then obviously Seattle took him at 20, and they just vomited on their shoes, and they're like, "Oh, Quentin Johnson!" I don't understand why you don't go Jordan Addison there, along with the fact that Addison is in your city. Maybe that's why they didn't. Maybe they saw so much of his tape that they're like, they didn't fall in love with him. But I mean, you got Quentin Johnson coming from Fort Worth out of TCU going to LA. You don't know how that adjustment's going to be. Addison's been there for over a year now at USC and thrived again last year. So I thought that was a total miss. That was my number one, bottom three. Number two, I still have my question marks on Will Levis. I thought that this was a red flag when he went home after day one. I just think if you're there, we saw other guys that went to the green, that went there thinking they were going to be first round picks and stuck around, and they just made it. They made the most out of it. I wish I had the prospect off the top of my head who stuck around, but he just bailed, man. He's like, God, when the going gets tough, I'm leaving. And that's, I don't know. It was just, it's such a turnoff to me for somebody that's going to be, you think, your franchise quarterback. Like, if the going, I get that you're embarrassed and everything, but when the going gets tough, you bail. That was a turnoff for me, man. It's just, he seems, I said this before, he seems cocky to me. He seems just really, and I don't know him personally, so I kind of feel bad saying this, but there seems to be a public arrogance with Levis, and that's something that you can't have. I mean, we saw that with Baker Mayfield going number one overall. He came in right away with, saying that he had a chip on his shoulder, and it's like, bro, you just won a Heisman and we're the number one overall pick. Like, what kind of chip do you have left on your shoulder? Like, and you mentioned that when you were speaking earlier on him, that you might like that Levis has a chip on his shoulder, and I get that, but there's a different, there's just an arrogance that's a turnoff to me. And that was a big reason why he ended up falling, according to reports where they didn't love that he's sitting there taking bathroom selfies of his biceps and his ripped back. In his pro day, he went sleeveless so he could show off the gun show. Like, there's no place. There's no place for arrogance at the quarterback position in the NFL. And there's a place for a chip on your shoulder. That's Aaron Rodgers said from day one, like, I want to make the Niners regret not taking me number one overall. They took Alex Smith. They clearly regret that decision. They've been trying to figure out their their number one quarterback since then, basically. But I don't know. That's a huge turnoff for me. I get why the Titans would take him there in the second, but I just I'd struggle to have him in my building personally. And the number 3 in my bottom 3 is going to be the Patriots, taking both a kicker and a punter. That's like, I get it. Bill Belichick, you value special teams. You're going to use Christian Gonzalez in special teams as well as a returner. So I get that he values special teams, but in the 4th round, taking a kicker when you don't have any skill position players, I just think you go skill position player, you figure out the kicker later. That's the other one, is just taking both a kicker and a punter. And I bet one of those players doesn't even make the team.
Probably not. Marvin Mims was the last pick in the 2nd round.
Okay. Hey, nice call.
I'm going to dive into a little bit of MLB here before we end the episode. Didn't get a chance to do that last week, and we are picking a great spot.
Sorry to cut you off. The player that, or one of the players that was invited to the green room in the past that did not get picked in the 1st round and was projected to be a high-end first round pick, Deshaun Kaiser. There are a lot of similarities with Deshaun Kaiser and Will Levis.
Yeah.
If Levis goes and ends up being Deshaun Kaiser 2.0, will you be shocked?
No.
There you go.
No.
Me neither. All right, back to it.
Picked a good time to talk MLB. We are recording on Tuesday, and it is the return of Bryce Harper from his Tommy John surgery. He's going to be playing for Phillies this evening. So I thought that was a pretty cool story. I mean, he's 100 and some days out from
160 from the date of his surgery today, live on Taco Tuesday.
Just insane. So that's usually a year plus injury. Granted, most of the time we see that in pitchers where that's what they do is pitch and throw. He's going to be DHing and not doing a lot of throwing in the meantime, but still impressive that he's able to come back this early on and get into that Phillies lineup.
Yeah. Another player that is coming back, and one of the feel-good stories, I think, in all of baseball that we've probably seen in a while, Liam Hendriks, 4 months ago, diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he's starting his rehab. He started his rehab assignment today, 4 months ago. People used to die of the common cold, and this dude was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is, it's not one of the more deadly, types of cancer, but it's still cancer, man. You get diagnosed with cancer, you're freaked out. 4 months later, he's starting his rehab assignment with the White Sox. They need all the help they can get. They have been an absolute atrocity this season, but that's one of the better feel-good stories. He's one of the more dominant relief pitchers, more dominant closers that we've had over the last couple of years, both with the White Sox and the A's. So you gotta love that as another feel-good story, along with Bryce Harper, and then a quick, not so good feel-good story, but a player that is coming back. Jose Altuve has begun his rehab assignment, but fuck the Astros.
I'll jump back on the feel-good side of this, Gel, and the 2 best teams in baseball right now, Tampa Bay Rays and the Pittsburgh Pirates, the only 2 teams that are still in the single digits for losses. Again, we're recording on Tuesday, so they haven't played yet, so the Pirates could fall out of that, but just some great stories there. Drew Maggi, the longtime guy in the Pirates farm system, got drafted by them, cut, went over and just kind of hopped around, re-signed him again and got his first call up. And I was yelling at the Pirates, and this wouldn't have been a feel-good story for a while because the first game that he got called up didn't even make it into the game. We ended up staying up there for a couple more games. The next game he got the start and pinch hit, struck out, but said it was awesome. Wasn't sure if he was getting sent down, and then ended up getting the start the next day, went 0 for 3. And then they said that they were going to send him back down, but due to them being a double header on Saturday, they ended up being able to keep him as the 27th player on the team and then send him down afterwards. And he gets his first hit and his first extra base hit. So it was pretty cool to see that.
Did you see the video of that first hit? Did you hear that crowd? That was on the road.
And Washington. Yes.
Like
at the Nationals part.
And the Nationals suck. I can't imagine that was a 40,000 person crowd. That was probably closer to 22,000. It sounded like it was like a World Series. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I mean, that was one of the loudest ovations I've heard. And I thought it was at PNC until I would have, if I was just listening to it, not watching the video, I would have thought, hey, that has to be at home. That's on the road. That's like, I don't know what the Nationals did. If they're like, hey, Drew Maggi, been in the, minors for 13 seasons, finally makes it up at age, 33 probably.
Yeah, I think low 30s, mid 30s.
Like, and to hear like that, just the way the crowd erupted, that's what makes this story way cooler, because he's never gonna he's never gonna hear something like that again, more than likely.
Right. Probably not.
But it's so cool that he was able to experience that. I was listening to an interview with him the other day, actually, and they were talking about what are the main differences right off the top of being in minor league ball for as long as you had and being in major league ball. And he's like, bro, everything's free. Like, which is a major deal, no pun intended, when you've been in the minors for so long and you're working on a $50,000 salary and you're on the road constantly, you're sleeping in hotels. A lot of times these minor leaguers, they have roommates, and you don't get to necessarily pick your roommate. I think the team does. So you might not always end up like rooming with your best friend. You're going to be in hotels, like low end budget hotels that might have bed bugs. You're going to be like, you have to do your own laundry possibly at the hotel. Like there's not a team facility or an equipment manager that just takes care of all this kind of stuff. So he's just like, right away, he's like, yeah, the first thing that I stole once I got up to the majors was a razor. And I'm like, holy shit. Like razor is the most like stealing a razor, it's like, guess that's what you get when you get up to the minors. But I thought that was a cool interview, but absolutely feel good story. One last thing, and we'll be quick on this. Cody Bellinger, totally killing it so far. Start. Had another belly bomb was it yesterday or maybe the day before? And he's killing it so far. What are your thoughts on if he were to keep this up, which, I mean, he's on an outrageous pace right now. I can't imagine that he keeps this pace up, but if he has a really, really solid season, what kind of contract do you think that he ends up signing? Do you see him just staying with the Cubs and grabbing himself a 5-year, 200? Nah, it's probably a little steep. Probably maybe a 5-year, $125 million deal. Or do you think teams might still be like, we saw the last 3 years with the Dodgers, you kind of sucked. We'll give you another 1 or 2 year flyer deal. What do you think for Belly's future?
He's still young, so I think he'll get a pretty solid deal if he keeps this up. I think he's going to be a trade away candidate for the Cubs at the deadline. He's just on that 1-year deal, so I don't see him sticking around much longer than that. If they're not in the playoff race, there's no sense in really keeping him. Get some prospects and flip it. Cubs aren't going to sign him long-term. They have Brennan Davis in the farm system, Pete Crow Armstrong. So those are guys that should be cracking the major league level in the next year or so. So I don't see any long-term plans there, especially they have Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki in the corners. So not really a ton of room. And that's a lot of money just to pay for a DH. So, but I think another team, though, he's kind of rejuvenated his career. Probably just need to get out of LA. We see a change of scenery a lot of times do a lot of good for people. So happy for it. And he's been fun to watch so far.
Love it. Another feel-good story.
Yes. Another feel-good story. We finally get our first win for our golf picks. Tony Bologna now wins the Mexico Open over your pick, John Rahm. So fun Sunday with the two of us tuned in, going back and forth in our text. John Rahm made a nice run towards the end there, but just too much Tony Finau. And finally in the win column, Tony was out celebrating, caddying for his kids on the par 3 course afterwards. And it's awesome. Love seeing Tony win, but happy to finally get our first win and get my 3 strokes back. I lost the prior week.
Yeah, when I was at work today, and I was talking to my coworker that lives out in California, just over a Teams meeting, named Tony, and as he was talking, I just said, like, kind of under my breath, I said, Tony Baloney. And and he's like, what's that? Like, or just kind of like, hey, did you want to speak up? And I was like, oh no, I was just making a dumb joke. I called you Tony Baloney. He's like, I never heard that one.
Really?
Dead on. I can't make that up.
Huh.
I mean, I guess that'd be an easy one to make up, but I'm not making it up. Call him Tony the Tiger maybe next week.
Right. Just keep calling him Tony. Different Tonys, but no, that not really much else from that. I mean, it was pretty much what we expected. The
Ramalama Ding Dong had a nice showing. He had, I believe, a 61 on Saturday.
Yeah.
Because he looked dead in the water after Friday, at least in terms of competing. Had that killer Saturday and hung in there for a while up until the end of Sunday. I believe it was like 15 or 16. And it looked like, hey, Tony went in the bunker 2 shots in a row. And on Rahm's second, I'm like, this is when Rahm can make his move. Rahm sends one into the same bunker, the same greenside bunker Finau did. And after the round, Rahm said that, hey, this looked like my shot looked dynamite off, right away. And he left it 6 feet short. And that was kind of the end of it for Rahm. And Tony just walked away with it. Comfortable W.
Yep. We'll be back in the designated event territory tomorrow when we preview the Wells Fargo. So we'll get into some more big names that'll be playing in that tournament. But again, that'll be tomorrow. We'll have the NFC side of our draft recap. Can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Go to YouTube, Dead Arm Sports, into the search bar, subscribe, click the bell there. That way you know when our live episodes drop. You can watch us afterwards. The replay is up there as well. You can find us at Dead Arm Sports, Gel at Das Gel. I'm at Das JPEG. Give us a follow. Send us any questions, comments you have, anything you want to see us do on the show. We are more than happy to take a look, hit you back up. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot, and we will swag you up. What are those platforms, Joe?
Hit us up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review to whatever your chosen listening platform is. Find us on YouTube. Just search Dead Arm Sports. We should be the first channel that pops up at the top of your page. Hit that bell so that whenever we go live, whenever we put out any new content, you get notifications. Make sure you're keeping up with what we're putting out, and we want any comments on any videos that you guys have, any suggestions, anything you want us to touch on, maybe in the following episode. We're giving our feedback now on the AFC. Maybe next week when we're going to be talking, we talk football every week. We talk football every episode. If you want to comment and say just over YouTube, hey, I know you mentioned player X. What do you think about if they would have taken player Y? And we can talk about that in the following episodes. So we encourage those comments, suggestions going forward. And as always, but again, make sure to hit that bell so that you get alerts whenever we go live.
If you could tell someone you know about the podcast, that would be great. Help us spread the word, get you even more content. We would appreciate that greatly. Again, we'll be back with you tomorrow, recap the NFC side. Sure, we'll be talking Bears and Packers, but tune in tomorrow to find out. And Gel, close it out.
Who was it that just won the Mexico Open?
Tony Baloney!
Tony Baloney!